Everything said on this podcast is entirely for entertainment purposes only. This is satirical and should not be considered clinical advice in any situation. Please use your own clinical judgment, using your own knowledge, expertise, and research. Consult with your local eye department if you are unsure, and always act in the best interest of the patient. Do not listen to the things that we say and take it seriously.
Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Glasses Half Full. Today we're joined by Wajid and Hammad. These are two optometrists that have just recently come back from a charity overseas trip where they were testing eyes and giving visual aid to people abroad. They've done this a few times and they're kind enough to come join and explain a little bit about what they do, how to do it, and spread some information about it. So, guys, you just came back from, is it Jordan? And this isn't the first time you've been around the world. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Probably a little bit of background. Myself and Hamad, we studied together at university. That's where we met. We became friends. We live quite far apart. I'm up in Yorkshire. He's down in London. And around the time, I don't know, not long after we qualified, we kind of were aware of charities that went abroad and did trips, and it felt like kind of quite a good thing to do, like on a professional side, on a bit of a religious side as well. So we joined up with quite a well-known charity called Vision Aid overseas. Ahmad went on a couple of trips, and we went on a couple of trips as well, and we went to places like Burkina Faso. Ahmad went to a couple of other places in Africa, and we went to the Philippines as well. And the idea was, it was just nice to kind of give up a little bit of our time and maybe go. The trips are normally about a week, and just to do one at least once a year. It's not too much time to take out. And then Hamad in particular was always kind of quite keen to say, when you go on these trips, they're quite good, and you just kind of tagging along, and you just everything's kind of done for you. And they obviously select their own countries and that kind of stuff. And then there's certain places that these charities, for obvious reasons, they won't go to. They won't go to any kind of risky area, anywhere where there's any kind of conflict, which is fair enough. So, Africa is an obvious place where they go to, and a little bit in the Far East, maybe like Malaysia and Philippines. So he was always quite keen to say that there's certain places, maybe even in Pakistan, maybe even in the Middle East, these would be good places to kind of go to. And it might mean kind of setting up on our own. So having done quite a few trips and seen how it works, what the setup's like, then you get that kind of experience of, we know what kind of testing setup it requires and that kind of stuff. So the first trip led by Hamad, we went to Gambia, and we pretty much did that ourselves. We partnered with a UK charity, but it was a small trip. There was literally just myself and Hamad testing. A friend of ours went along who's got dispensing experience, and that was it. And there was just three of us for a week, and we saw pretty much like 1,000 patients, and it was like full on, and it went really, really well. And we were like, this was in Gambia. We were like, there's even more people to see there, and our intention was to kind of go back. That's still our intention. We'll come on to that a little bit later on. And then Hamad started doing some kind of more work about, obviously, with the situation in the Middle East and things, how they've changed and escalated in the last couple of years. He started talking to some charities about the possibility of even going to Palestine, or, which is obviously pretty much impossible. Well, what's the next best thing? We could go to some of the bordering countries where there are some refugees there. And obviously, we know historically a lot's been going on in Syria as well. So that's how we ended up in Jordan. So that's a background of kind of how we fell into a little bit of charity work with some other charities, and then had a really good trip to Gambia. That was actually filmed. They made a documentary about that. Forgot to mention that, actually. I should have told you guys before, and it is available. And it's quite good. It kind of shows everything that we did. But then moving on to this trip, the main difference with this trip is, number one, we went to the Middle East, and I'll pass over to mine in a second. The second thing that he was quite keen on doing is, it became a multidisciplinary trip. So there were also doctors and dentists and pharmacists. So it went from two people testing and a dispenser in Gambia to maybe around 40 people that went on this trip. But I'll let Ahmad kind of go through how he set that up, and then we'll talk a little bit about how it went. Over to you, Ahmad.
Yeah, so just to carry on from what Waj done, so we started with Vision Aid, done quite a few countries. I mean, I think Waj wasn't on all of them, but it included Gambia, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Zambia, Ghana. There's quite a few that we went on. And my main purpose then was obviously to do charity trips, but also to learn the trade. I wanted to know how to do it. Long term, I always had this plan that I wanted to organize my own trips and, go to some of the countries that, they don't go to. Like Wad said, they'll do their due diligence and they'll go to the safer countries, which does make sense. It's a big, UK charity. Just to correct on one thing you said earlier, Wad, we actually used to go away for 2 weeks back then. There were long trips, if you remember, it's 2 weeks with a break in between. And then uh, I always wanted to do my first trip. I had quite a few links in charities. I always knew people who were quite high up in charities. So I thought, started approaching them. First time it was quite difficult. A lot of charities were saying, "Yeah, we'll get back to you." No one actually got back to me. And then the charity that we actually went to Gambia with, they were really helpful. They helped us. They said they wanted to make a documentary out of it. Really forthcoming. So we done the Gambia trip. It was just three of us, wasn't it? Waj? Me, you, and a dispensing assistant. I think we went there for about a week. Maybe done 5 days testing. Each day, me and Waj were banging out maybe 100 patients each. And at the end of the day, we're still having to turn people away. That's one thing you get in the African countries. You'll never ever see all your patients in a day. Very rarely does that happen. Unfortunately, you have to turn people away. And then we had a couple of other trips planned. There was the one to South Africa that never materialized, one to Bangladesh, and then COVID happened. So that sort of put everything on the back foot, sort of scuppered some of the trips we had planned. And then after COVID, obviously everyone starts working again. And I always thought, if I'm going to do it, I might as well do a big one. Involve the doctors, involve the dentists, involve the pharmacists, do it all in one go. Started seeing who was interested. Straight away, we had a lot of interest. Some teams started off a bit slow, like the dentists, but a lot of them, there was that interest there, especially when we mentioned Jordan. So when I started speaking to this charity, rather than me deciding where to go, I said to the charity, where do you think is a good place to go at this time? Where can you facilitate for us to go? And initially they suggested Lebanon. And Lebanon was actually our original plan. And then what happened is political situation changed there, that there issues with Israel. So then they said the safest option in that area, the safest country by far to be able to see the refugees is either Turkey or Jordan. They said Jordan's probably the easiest one for us to arrange. So then we started sitting down, arranging what we're going to see. It was actually done slightly backwards compared to how you'd normally do a medical trip. So it was done back to front. So normally what you'd have is you'd have the country you're going to, they tell you what their needs are and they start to arrange things. And then you pick your team. But we done it the opposite way, where we picked a team and we said we've got Optom team of say 15, dentists of 8, doctors of 10. Can you start arranging clinics for us? Can you start arranging patients for us? And it just went from there. We started fundraising. I wouldn't say it went viral, but within medical communities, it sort of went mini viral, you could say, couldn't you, Waj? In sense that, all the Optoms knew about it, a lot of doctors knew about it, a lot of the dentists started knowing about it, it went on the WhatsApp group. And then we organized that. There was a few hiccups on the way, unexpected hiccups that no one could have predicted. I think about a month before we were due to go, our aim, by the way, in Jordan was to see the Syrian and the Palestinian refugees. Whereas the plan was always to see more Syrians and Palestinians because the Palestinians have been established there for decades, most of them. Whereas the Syrians were still relatively new, 5 to 10 years in Jordan, still in the camps. And then the government in Syria got overthrown. So that scuppered a lot of things. A lot of things were up in the air. People didn't know what was happening. Authorities didn't know what was happening. There were the Syrians. What was their situation now? Were they refugees? Were they not refugees? Are they considered refugees legally? Because now they've got the right to return back to Syria. To even the charities, I think even the Jordanian government, they weren't too sure what to do. At one stage, it looked like we weren't going to be let in because they just wanted to close the borders. Obviously, there was for them, they had other threats as well. They had potential terrorism threats from people crossing over from Syria potentially. ISIS, for example, because the borders were now open and one being manned as well in Syria. So there's all sorts of issues. But alhamdulillah, we managed to organise an excellent trip, raised a lot of money, done a lot of good work out there. one of the main things we've done, one of the best things we've done was establish, a good network of medical professionals. So, who are keen to go, who had friends, colleagues who were keen to go on future trips. And that was a big part of organizing, Jordan, to establish that network and just start it off. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Waj.
No, I think just, what I did forget is you mentioned some of the other places, and we were talking about how the difficulty that you have when you go to like political regions and conflict regions. And we actually um planned once again to go to Bangladesh. And I don't know if you mentioned that we didn't end up going, but actually,
No,
we
Waj, we did end up going. We didn't
this is
end up doing the trip.
yeah, imagine that we kind of raised kind of lots of funds, had the glasses. We got all the way to Bangladesh, and they basically just gripped us in the airport, kept us there for about 8 or 10 hours, and then just walked in and said, "Yeah, you need to leave." And we were like, "Leave where?" And they're like, "Leave the country." And they literally frog marched us and just put us on a flight because um, obviously the Rohingya, the refugees that are there in a pretty awful situation. That's who we intended to see, and we kind of like let them know that we were coming, all this kind of stuff. And when we got there, we realized, obviously, politically, all our backgrounds are like Pakistani and stuff, and they were really interested in that. And like we're born here, brought up, and they basically, I don't know why I'm laughing, but they literally did just kick us out of the country. It's a bit mad.
Did you
So
just return back to the UK then?
we stayed in Dubai for a few days, but yeah, we did come back. Did come back.
Yeah, originally what's meant to happen when you get deported, for a start, they're meant to give a reason why you're deported. So even because they told us to get on the first flight out. So we got out on an Emirates flight. That was the first flight out. And what happens when you get deported, you're treated like criminals. Even if we've done nothing wrong, we're going on a charity trip. And the next thing you know, we're having our passports taken and being deported. Everyone's looking at us. Even when we've got clearance to get into Bangladesh, we're working for NGO. We've got all the clearances apart from the visa. And then even the Emirates, like the head steward, said, "This is a bit odd." He said, he goes on, when they give you a deportation form, he goes, "They're meant to write a reason of why you're being deported." He goes, "But on your one, they've just left it completely blank." He goes, "So that doesn't help us." But what happened is originally you're meant to cut a long story short, you're meant to go back to your country of origin. But on our way back, as part of our trip, we actually planned to do Umrah. So everything got scuppered there as well, because we was going to stop over in Saudi for like a week to 2 weeks after. Now, if we end up back in like Heathrow, London, it's what we're gonna do. Then we're gonna arrange to get to Saudi. So we landed in Dubai. We had to speak to their immigration services. They were really good because this was commonly happening. It wasn't just us. So Bangladesh were turning away a lot of people. I mean, they didn't. It wasn't just that we was Pakistan. That was the main reason, but also they didn't want the Rohingya in their country. Now, when you had all the aid workers coming in, it was delaying them going back to their country. So they were just deporting. That at that stage, they started deporting a lot of people. Dubai were well aware of it. We just asked them, "Look, can we stay here just for 5, 6 days? Well, we're waiting to go Saudi. We promised we're not going to sell because we had 3, 4 suitcases full of glasses. So that raises separate issues at immigration. Dubai, UAE were really good. They let us stay, and then we managed to stay there. Quickly booked a hotel. Had a hard time there, didn't we? Why it was tough in Dubai, wasn't it? Staying in that hotel that we stayed at and doing what we did. It's a tough time. But then we went to Saudi, come back, and we just straight away we just started planning for the next trip. You just gotta take it as it is. It is what it is. It
So
wasn't ideal.
what was the next trip after Bangladesh?
So not long after that, COVID hit. So we had ideas of Pakistan. I think South Africa was one of them as well to go to the townships. But then just as we was planning to do it, COVID hit. And then obviously that knocked us back a couple of years.
Yeah.
There was a lot of uncertainty about travel, so forth. Let's leave. I mean, it done to all the NGO charities. And then we just started planning. As I said earlier, we just started speaking to the charities. What are the options? Where can we go to? So Global Sun Relief, the one we work with, they're based in the Far East. And they said there's plenty of places we could do the Far East, so we can do like Cambodia, we can do Sri Lanka, we could do Indonesia. The only problem with those countries, they're a bit further from home. So we thought, is there anywhere closer we can do? And they said, what about the Middle East? What about going to see the refugees? And said, yeah, that sounds good. Like I said, then it was Lebanon was suggested, some of the camps in Turkey, but Jordan was the one that really appealed to us because Jordan was one of the ones where you could stay in the capital and you had close access to both the Jordanian and the Palestinians, and they had quite a good network there as well. So that's what we chose initially.
So you, both of you, obviously optometrists, and the trips had progressed into the very recent, the very successful one with doctors and dentists, etc., pharmacists. What services are you actually providing to those in need? What are you just testing?
In terms of, is that just referring to the eye care team or
Well,
all
all
of
of them, and more specifically the eye care.
So what did you begin with? And like in the Gambia trip and the initial stuff,
So
what services were you?
Gambia trip was purely just spectacles. So we went there just to dispense glasses, just to dispense spectacles. We bought them all from the UK. Gambia, like most other countries, said to us, don't even bother bringing any secondhand glasses, used glasses, which is actually a WHO, World Health Organization, regulation that if you're going to do charity work, it has to be new glasses. No country really accepts, those used glasses that you see in practice anymore. You might get some people that go, on a small trip, the individual that goes to a third world country and they take them. But when you're dealing with a government and the health authorities like you have to do, none of them are going to accept that. So Gambia was just spectacles only, where we're refracting, giving the glasses out. Jordan was a little bit more. We actually had an ophthalmologist, a local ophthalmologist with us. So any cases of pathology was referring to him, seeing where we could get them referred to. We took a shed load of drops with us, a lot of dry eye drops, which are kindly donated by various companies. We also, one thing we introduced in Jordan, which was for the first time, and I've never seen any of the eye care charities take, we actually took 2 orthoptists with us as well. So their main purpose was their main role was actually doing visions, because they do it so much better than what the optoms do, especially with the children. They're excellent at doing it. They've got their charts. But whenever there was any sort of BV issues, they'll just come in, do their orthoptist stuff, diagnose what they can. Obviously, there's a limited amount they can treat. If there's any orthoptic exercises they need to do for some of the younger ones, they would actually take over there. And each time that we do a trip, like, we always look to expand upon what we've done. For example, with the next trip to Gambia, which I'm sure we'll cover in a moment, we're looking to take ophthalmologists. So we're just in the process of speaking to the main eye hospital there about actually bringing ophthalmologists over and maybe looking to do cataract operations, see what they can do. They might do acute sort of mech sort of services. We may put a couple of ophthalmologists behind a slit lamp and they'll deal with all the acute stuff, the infections, lumps and bumps and so forth. So there's always something extra that we're looking to add where we can.
It was pretty much eye care. So what we mean by that is you basically buy lots of kind of ready readers. So the common questions that can tend to come up is, what about unusual RXs or high sills? And then obviously in these countries they do have labs and stuff. And we raise money for these trips. We're always kind of quite keen to, on the trips that we've had as well, to make sure that people know that our own costs in terms of our flights, hotels, we just pay that ourselves. So the money pretty much goes to spending the money on spectacles. But then we have other funds as well, and we use those if we do come across, anything bigger than, let's say, like a 2.5, 3 sill, we'll then do that separately, maybe give them a frame still, and then say, we'll deal with the local people and say, look, can we get this made up after we leave, just as an RX? And then the other thing, obviously, is when you see people with, let's say, dense cataracts, which you see obviously quite a lot of. And once again, certainly in Gambia, cataract surgery itself, for us, it's not hugely expensive. Obviously, for the locals, it is. And once again, there was provision in place to say, well, we're going to use, with this patient, speak to whenever you go to these clinics, there's often local doctors hanging around, local health officials, and that kind of stuff, because obviously you're visiting their country, and to speak to those people. I can't remember how much is the cataract surgery in Gambia, Hamal. Can you remember? It wasn't a lot, was it?
Generally in third world countries, it's probably fairly cheap, £50, £100 an eye. I mean, obviously, if you do it in bulk, it's a lot cheaper. Like some of the some of the charities, like Munted Aid, for example, they go out and they just bang them out. Jordan was actually quite expensive from what you.
Yeah, it was about
So Jordan was an odd one, that the cheapest that we was finding cataracts per eye was 500-600, which is at least 10 times the cost of what you will in a third world country. But that's another thing where I'd normally look to cover the costs of some of the dense cataracts. Like Wad said, if there's anisometropia, big difference between the prescription in both eyes, big seals, we look to get that made locally. So we'll take our own supply. I mean, our supply from memory covers ±1 up to ±10. So we're basically going from -10 up to +10. So we've got that covered in 050 steps and from 6 to 10 in one diopter steps. So we've got most of that covered. We normally take like a couple of thousand out. So we've got that covered. But when you've got the sills and you know, you need some nootropic prescriptions, and we try to get that made locally generally.
With the sills, let's say, for example, if it wasn't a very high sill, would you just prescribe best sphere?
Yeah, best sphere, and potentially it could also be best sphere, best eye on some of the elderly people, depending on what the situation is. We don't take any sills with us because it's quite problematic. You know, we used to have a big problem with that with when we used to take donated glasses in the early days of Vision Aid. They changed to new glasses as well after. So we'd have the powers, and even in terms of testing, it varies on, you know, the numbers you've got and the setup you've got. Sometimes there'll be less patients, so you can give, you know, a little bit more time, but you got to weigh up. Is it better for me to do a shorter test and a more crude test and fit in twice the amount of people, or to concentrate on, you know, seeing people, you know, more thoroughly? But then normally what happens is you'll get that odd one. Like if you get a child who's a high myope, who's got big seals, you spend a little bit of time on that person. You know, you got other people to cover. Especially in Jordan, we had that luxury. We didn't have that when it was just me and Waj, but in Jordan we had, I think we had 12 optoms. So we had that. We had some that specialized. One of our guys was we actually had a third orthoptist from Glasgow who was also an optom. So he's an orthoptist become optom. So he was doing all the ped refractions. We had a few other optoms who work in hospital, a few IP optoms. They were doing a lot of the ped stuff as well. So it depends what you do. I mean, generally, when we do ophthalmoscopy on these trips, it's basically just to make sure to check if there's any pathology that's going to hinder their vision and the refraction. So generally, it could be just look at a macula, look at a disc, just to see what's happening there. You see a lot of advanced glaucoma on these patients. The only time you really look at a periphery is if the vision's poor, macula and disc look okay, and then you're looking for a detachment, and then you're just refracting. Ret is key. Ret helps you out a lot there. Although saying that in Jordan, as the only time I've ever had, we actually did have an auto refractor on some of the days, and that did actually help when you're seeing a lot of people.
So when it comes to the kind of layout, because obviously in Jordan you mentioned how it was more multidisciplinary than your earlier trips, where you mentioned, I think did you say dentists as well as doctors that you had?
Yeah. So the three main team, I mean, doctors and pharmacists go together, and then we had the dentists. Dentists are actually the most problematic ones to get their set up because of basically the sanitation, the cleaning of the instruments, getting the chair. So it's a real difficult one for dentists. What we actually had in Jordan, we actually had a mobile trailer. So the charity actually hired a mobile trailer, which actually had half of it was the dental suite, and the other half was for the doctors.
Mm-hmm.
Our
Dentists
setup's
do
normally
a lot
quite.
of extractions, they were saying, because obviously they can't really plan, like, you know, here you might have a treatment and then go back in a bit and have more treatment. I think sometimes it's just when I was speaking to them, they were saying it's just to stop infection and this, that, and the other. Easier for them just to do extraction because it stopped the pain and it would stop it kind of spreading and that kind of stuff.
So sorry, I was just wanting to go more into the layout of how it's worked.
So it depends. It depends on where we're testing, because we vary where we're testing. Every day we're somewhere else. For example, on one then sometimes we might be in a school, and then you may have classroom settings. Sometimes in Jordan, one of the schools we went to, we actually all just tested in the playground. So you had like two walls split up half and half. You put your charts up. They're normally 3 meter Snellen charts. 6 meters takes up too much room. So you've got the small Snellen charts. And we're just set up. Normally, you'd work in pairs so you can share a trial lens case. So you'd have like a trial lens case. Imagine on the table, you'll have a trial lens case. You'll be working either side. So you'll be pairing up generally. A lot of time you'll share the equipment as well. You might have someone, I mean, it varies. Sometimes you might have one of the optoms doing fundoscopy for everyone and so saying that one's fine, that one's fine. You might have someone who goes down the line of kids and just does a quick ret and just says that one's plano, just leave that one. That's just a quick one. So it really varies. But there was a day, for example, in Jordan where we actually tested in tents when we actually went to a proper refugee camp. So someone gave up their tent for the day. Three families, I think, lived in that tent. They gave up, and the Optom team actually tested in the tents. You just got to make do with what you can do, whatever the setup is.
I don't know if, like, when you describe it, people think, oh, we were just in one place, but yeah, we never tested in the same place twice. And even looking back at the Gambia trip, I think we were 2 or 3 locations, so 2 days in one, then another couple of days. So just trying to kind of keep moving locations. But in Jordan, I don't think we tested in the same place more than once, did we?
No,
So
no,
it
same in Gambia. Yeah, we test in different place every day.
every day.
Is it
Yeah.
different cities or?
Yeah.
In Gambia, because it's quite small, we generally test in and around, the capital, because that's where the bulk of the population, is centered. Now, even when we're speaking to, I was actually speaking, having meetings with a health authority in Gambia this time. They did ask us if we want to go rural. The problem is rural is the logistics side. It's quite difficult traveling, with a whole team, 2-3 hours each way. uh, it would be nice to go rurally, but the thing with Gambia, we can go 20 minutes away from the city centre and there's loads of poor communities. And it's easier for us just to test there. And we're going to get better access to clinics. We'll have some electricity that we need because we still need electricity for, frame adjustments and so forth and things like that. So in Gambia, we normally go in and around the main capital. In Jordan, we travelled quite far. We was on the Syrian border from what I remember. It was like a couple of miles away on some of the days.
Yeah, we went very close to the West Bank as well. That's another thing, like, logistically, when you go to these places, you have to have somebody on the ground there that kind of hosts you and then takes you around. And like when we obviously our mindset when we go there is it's not a holiday, time's limited. So we want to kind of do as much work as possible. But when you go to these other countries, Gambia is a little bit like that. Jordan was a little bit like that. The charity workers there, it's kind of their normal job, and they're just on a bit of naturally a little bit of a go slow. So, for example, in Jordan, it would be right. We were traveling like hour and a half,
No,
quite away.
I think it was 2.5 hours most days actually.
But then halfway along the trip, they'd be like, "Yeah, we're gonna." And you know what? They'd take you to some like quite historical religious sites and this, that, and the other, and then be like, "Yeah, we're gonna stop here for a bit," which we didn't really expect because we thought we'd just go there. And even in Gambia, I think in Gambia, because we had such a big team in Jordan, it was a case of like, we're on a big coach. We can't really do that much. We've just got to kind of go with the flow. When we're in Gambia, I think they were on a bit of a chill as well, but it's quite easy because we were such a small team just to say, look, we just want to crack on, from that point of view. And we were turning up at these clinics and there'd be like 200 people waiting at 9 o'clock in the morning. But yeah, you've got to, it's kind of that thing of, you can never be rude to your host. You've got to kind of go by their flow of things. But it can be in Jordan, there was, a little bit times where it was a little bit frustrating because because it was quite a lot of travel and sometimes we'd stop along the way and then it's like half 10, 11 o'clock before you kind of really set up where you're keen to kind of just do that. So in terms of logistics, it can be difficult. You've got to kind of be a bit pushy at times. I might have upset a few people in Gambia, I remember. Um, just, but it has to be done. You have to, because I think you can't go there and shout the odds, but you've got to have really good people on the ground. There's a couple of days in Jordan where maybe we didn't see quite as many people as we would like. Whereas in Gambia, they were doing like going into these like slightly rural areas, doing like radio adverts saying, look, these guys are coming in a couple of weeks. You can get your eyes tested. These are people like they've not even got readers. They've got nothing, making like long journeys just to get their eyes tested and stuff. So the numbers were kind of huge. Whereas in Jordan, we had a variety, like Hamad said. We tested in a hospital in the center. We tested in one of the other towns, and it was, they were quite well dressed. They were okay, and then literally the very next day we were testing in like literally tents where kids were barefoot, families, 2 or 3 families in like very very about as rudimentary as you can kind of get and that kind of stuff. So I think that's the picture that people have a lot in their heads, but sometimes you can test people in quite a a decent clinic or something like that. So it varies quite a lot. So myself and Ahmad, we've known each other quite a long time. We're quite chilled out. So when things are a bit stressful or it doesn't really go to plan, we're not, it just kind of, you two guys know me anyway. You kind of just go with the flow and you've got to have that mindset when you're out there. If you're someone who's a bit OCD and everything needs to be bang on, or you're about to start panicking if things go to plan, you see that on people that often haven't been on trips before. You're going to struggle a little bit. I think, it's just very different to kind of the UK in terms of people's attitudes, how people are seen. You know what it's like, isn't it? You go abroad, everyone queues in the UK, people wait their turn. It's not quite like that abroad and stuff. People go a bit mental. You've got to factor all that kind of stuff in, but I think it makes it quite interesting.
A question that I had with actually testing was, because obviously you're abroad, is how do you take history?
Yeah, do you have a translator?
Yeah, you need translators, yeah. So I think Gambia is probably the best example, even though we're talking about Jordan, because in those rural areas, there's not even a hint of it of English, and the translators that we had in Gambia were excellent, and they were pretty good in Jordan as well. I think we had one optom who spoke Arabic. I forget where she's from. Anyway, she was really
She's
good.
Syrian, yeah.
Yeah, she's Syrian. So that makes a huge difference. So you kind of get that history. So the idea is people kind of line up outside, and you've got, Ahmad mentioned, a couple of orthoptists who were like really, really good. I think orthoptics are generally, apart from being way better than optoms at BV, because they're used to dealing with kids. I think they're quite friendly. They're kind of quite bubbly, just generally. So they would be outside and they would kind of try and take a little bit of history and then take the visions. So by the time they come with us to us, you've got a little slip. Obviously, if there is any, we've got a fascimeter there as well. If anybody did turn up with any glasses, the glasses can be fascimetered. But the idea is they're landing with you as an optom, with you've got some visions there, and you've got an idea of a vague history and that kind of stuff. But you do plenty of tests where the person just sat there blank, and you're kind of just doing your ophthalmoscopy, trying to get them to read some letters. So you're using a mixture of either like a Sheridan Garden style matching Snellen chart, or do you know the illiterate people use quite a lot. But yeah, if you're testing a group, if there's a group of like 10 optoms testing, and you've got like 2 translators, you're in trouble. You're gonna it just slows everything up. You can get it done, but it's so much quicker if you've got good translators.
Yeah, I mean, I'd add to that. Sometimes translators can slow you down. Also, as time goes on in your trip, normally after the first day, actually, you start to learn the local language. You start to, you know, mention in their own language
we use
what problems are you having. I mean, because you're hearing the same stuff over and over again. I'm having problems with read. I'm having problems with distance, and then you start to remember the words. So you do pick up some of the language.
Don't
and then you
forget
just
we used Google Translate. It's quite good. We didn't just have that on the original trips. Now, quite good, isn't it? Just set it to English.
we used that. This was probably the first time we used that, wasn't it, Waj?
Yeah, first
Google
time.
Translate,
It's quite
especially
good.
when you had to explain, what the situation, if you'd seen anything, if you've seen any pathology, what they do next, where they go. Because obviously, when you do the multidisciplinary, we had to coordinate them as well. For example, you go to this area for the doctors, this area for the dentist. So we did use Google Translate a lot.
I even use Google Translate testing in the UK.
Yeah, I've used it here as well. I mean, obviously I'm from London, so you're from Glasgow, so obviously
You're
there's a lot of people that won't speak
not
English.
that bad, it's fine. We can understand you, don't we? Like that. It's just...
One thing I wanted to, so I'm gonna split both of your answers up because you're gonna give different ones. Is that Hammad, so Wajid is a domiciliary optometrist basically, and Hammad, you're more of a locum, you're traditional.
Traditional practice-based, yeah.
So we'll start with you, Hammad. How did you find that kind of transition? Because obviously in a store, you're not really doing ret as much or even ophthalmoscopy. So how did you find that transition?
Funny enough, I still do. Maybe not as much now. I still use ret quite a bit. Children first visit, I always generally use ret, for the like hyperopes and so forth. We just learned it because we're from that generation that we still actually use ret quite a bit. And we was taught it, I'm sure the younger ones are as well, but they give up on it straight away. I mean, when we first qualified, the auto refractors were quite poor. They gave you like those vague prescriptions. They didn't really help you that much. So we got used to doing ret. It's just like if you done DOM work. I'm sure, like you get the companies that do the taster DOM day. It's not rocket science to do DOM work. It's not ideal situation, but it's not rocket science. So you just learn it. You adapt to it. A lot of it's to do with your mindset. In charity, generally, you have this you have this thought pattern where you do the best you can with whatever provisions you've got, whatever funds you've got, whatever provisions you've got. You just got to do the best you can, and it is as simple as that. That you just got to do as best you can. So,
did you find the adaptation pretty easy then?
Yeah, I found the adaptation. I mean, because I even now I prefer refracting with trial lenses and a trial frame. I don't even use a phoropter at work. So I'm used to it. And obviously I was, even when I started off, I was a mobile optom. So I was used to going to places which are unfamiliar. Then I started locuming. I mean, the practices are a lot better now, but there was some, 20 years ago, some like shocking places when you go in. I'm not going to mention any Scottish brands of opticians, but there was some chains where the equipment was terrible, and
No,
you just have to adapt to it.
apart from maybe cycling a kid, I don't remember the last time I picked up a rat. I'm fropped everything, auto fracture everything.
Yeah, but I think,
So
like, you know, bro, I took you out for a dom day, yeah, and you were like, I'm not sure if this is for me because it's just, and I kind of said you'll be fine because you can tell people that it's not for, and you can tell when it's just unfamiliarity that's kind of putting that person off and stuff. And I think I thought with you that's all it was, and then you're fine after that, isn't it? From that point of view. So I think once you kind of just, anytime you go out your comfort, I'd be like that weirdly. If I go and if I went to work in practice. I'd be a bit like panicky and like what's going on and this, that, and the other. And I
Well,
kind of
when was the last time you used a slit lamp?
I told you, isn't it? My daughter had an eye infection, and my mate's got a practice, and I took her in. Oh, it was like a bloodbath, man. Fluorescein all down her face, and like poor girl, man. It was like horrendous. Honestly, it was so bad. There's a vault there as well. I even picked that up. Had a go at that. That was a bit of a disaster as well. So yeah, it's pretty bad. But I'm pretty good at right, I suppose, from that point of view. So yeah, it's just whatever you get used to, I think. And I think you kind of see that when you're we had even on the Jordan trip, all the options were really good, but quite early on when you see people doing it, they're on the first trip and they're just taking like way too long, but not in a bad way. They're just trying to do it kind of properly. But when you've got people kind of queuing up, and like Hamad mentioned earlier on, you've got to kind of get that. If you're only giving best fear, no point spending 20 minutes trying to squeeze out a bit of sil when you're only going to give best fear anyway. So it's just about that. And just like being a good optom, isn't it? I think, when we all first kind of qualify, you're spending ages doing the tests and stuff, whereas the more experience you get, you're probably spending less time doing so because you're working stuff out based on what the patient's saying, what their needs are, and you kind of just coming to the conclusion a little bit quicker. So from that point of view, I think it just comes with time, isn't it? It's not too bad. 100% anybody that's done DOM work will cope better on these kind of trips just because you're lugging stuff around. You've got that same setup, the trial frame, the lenses, and that kind of stuff now. So
Did you
it's not.
take your dom kit? Your dom
Yeah,
kit?
yeah, I pretty much, yeah. So, some people took their own kit. Hamad's got a collection of like trial lenses that he's kind of built up over the years, and to his credit, he paid for quite a lot of it. When it comes to me, obviously, as you know, I've just got my dom kit, so I'm very used to that. I just take that with me,
Yeah,
whenever.
I mean, in Jordan, we was quite well kitted out. We had quite a few trial lens sets. We had the charts. We had a couple of eye cares, didn't we?
Yeah, like, that kind of stuff. Obviously, that, I took one of my eye care, a friend of mine, obviously, who does some dom work as well, and that kind of stuff. The only slight hiccup is I actually took my kit to Bangladesh, and then with all that stuff that happened, it got ended up like because they wouldn't let us take us into the country, and it was just a bit of headache because we flew back, the equipment and the glasses were I think were still in Saudi, and then they got cargoed somewhere, so that was a bit panicky because it's called all I use from that point of view. So yeah, that was it is a bit risky sometimes, but I think when you've got your own stuff, you just prefer to use it rather than other people's stuff from that point of view. But yeah, not too bad. You kind of get used to it. You guys can come on a trip now, isn't it? Now that you've heard there's an auto refractor, you've got no excuse now, have you?
Have you
that's all
told
I'll be
them?
using.
Have you told? Waj, have you told them about the buy-in? About
Yeah.
for the newbies, the buy-in.
Have you guys ever thought of doing a trip, or has it come across your radar?
Well,
What have your thoughts on this kind of
the
stuff?
the store that I resident at, the audiologist, they did a Gambia trip themselves where they had audiologists and optometrists. And I think this year they're doing here Pakistan where they just go to Pakistan, but it's just audiologists. So
Okay.
I expressed my interest in going to the Gambia because they were planning to do another one of them. But I don't think that came around and they just ended up doing the Pakistan hearing test. But I've always found it very interesting, and I've always wanted to do something like that, as in go abroad and just give it's giving the service and also doing something better that's not just in your community but something I guess across the world. And then it's another point of kind of dropping that fear of the standard that you work at. So like as a UK optometrist, especially in like a store, there's always that kind of thing like I need to make sure that everything is I need to make sure that I'm getting them to 6.5, and if there isn't, then I'm a little bit getting scared. But kind of managing expectation and things like that, I feel like that kind of fear kind of drops when you go and test in those kind of situations, and I think that also builds on your career as an optometrist, whilst you're also doing something really, really good as well.
You know what's funny about that is the first day you come back and you start testing in practice, and you see someone they're complaining about their vision and they're 6'6", and you're thinking, no, that's fine. Yeah, 6'9's fine, 6'12's fine. It's always funny when you come back on the first day and you're testing. You got all these nice equipment and people are complaining. You think, what are you lot complaining about? But just carrying on from what you said, it is very rewarding, very fulfilling. God has blessed you with a skill set. It's good to utilize that to help those less fortunate. There's not many better feelings in the world. Uh, and everyone says the same. And regularly get people go on one trip and they just carry on going, carry on going, carry on going. And even amongst, the teams that we've been with, Jordan, going back 15, 20 years ago when I was going Vision 8, there's some real gems out there, real sincere, hardworking, really charitable people that we've been with. And, I learned a lot from them. They trained me up, helped me a lot when I was a newbie as well. And they were really good like that as well.
That leads us on to probably Hussein, and obviously we've been to Gambia before, and we met a dentist over in Jordan who came with us. Really nice guy, and his family have basically got a long-standing charitable foundation, and Gambia comes up a lot. I think it's because I think it's like a form of like English colony, so English is like the kind of non-African language that people kind of speak there, and probably the setup's quite similar. But he's got a long established charitable foundation. His family do like huge amounts of work there. A lot of people give their zakat and that kind of stuff. Just general like building wells, schools, and that kind of stuff. And we had a really good experience in Gambia as well. And we also know there's a huge amount of people still to see there, because we were not effectively, we were just turning people away, because we'd be there from like 9 till 6 in huge amounts of numbers. So yeah, we are planning, or we no, I say planning, inshallah, we are going back in December of this year, and kind of partnering, I guess, with Hussein and his charity. What's his charity called, man?
So they've got two wings. They've got Gam Leicester, and then they're registered here, and they're registered in Gambia. So they've got two wings to their charity. I know the one here is Gam Leicester. I'm not sure if it's the same name in Gambia.
Oh yeah,
But
that's
their charity is obviously non-medical, because they do a lot of the medical humanitarian stuff, build water wells, build schools, build hospitals, and so forth. So they do excellent work out there.
yeah, and that's another thing just to touch on, which is having done Vision Aid, then progressed to kind of a Gambia trip in partnership, and then done this multidisciplinary trip. It was always just Hamad sorting a lot of it out. We've got like a bit of a core team, and then getting other people. And then it was like, I think just let's make it a bit more official. So we are now officially a charity.
No. So what we've done is we've
Got a name
created
out.
an organisation, because
I
there
was
was a lot
gonna
of confusion over who we were. A lot of questions were coming at us on the Jordan trip. Is this charity that you're going with, Global Islam Relief? Are they a medical charity? What experience have they got? So forth. And so many people, naturally, they really they question the charities and so forth. So what we thought we'd do this time is we'd set up our own organisation. It's a medical organisation, humanitarian medical relief, HMR for short. We've got a website, uh, humanitarianmedicalrelief.org. Uh, and we're just a group of medics, and it includes all the medics, all the ones that are going on the trip. And then we're not just with one charity. We can work with anyone. We can work with any NGO. We can work with any charity. We're independent of those. That gives some autonomy from them. They can approach us if they can. So say, for example, they said we've got donors who, or not even they've got donors. We operate in Malawi, and there's a real need for what you do, but we don't know the medics. Because one thing about the charities is we don't think we can do what they do in terms of the logistics and organizing clinics. I haven't got that skill set. That's where they come in. But what I have got is I've got a big network, mashallah, of medics across all the boards that I know. So they look to me to arrange your teams. So it's all about collaborating with them. You've all got your role. They provide the logistics, they provide the stuff on the ground. You know, I get the teams, I get the volunteers, I help with the fundraising. And it's just collaborating really. And even when we go, often it's not just us and one charity. We're collaborating with several charities at the same time. Jordan, there was maybe 3, 4 charity stroke NGOs involved. There was a dental one. There was the Arab one that helped us, AMR, Arab Medical Relief, or Arabian Medical Relief, Global Hassan, and then there was us. It's always a collaboration of multiple charities and NGOs and organisations.
It is difficult. You've got to have some autonomy, because even in the UK, it's a little bit of a trend. I don't know if it's a trend. I don't want to call it that, but you guys probably know there's probably 2 or 3 charities that I could just mention, and then people will say, "Oh, they're dodgy. They don't use the funds wisely." So you've got to be always careful, from that point of view, and that's why we've always tried to kind of pay for our own kind of flights, accommodation, and that kind of stuff, and just try and be as transparent. Because obviously, it's a big responsibility when you kind of people are donating money, especially when you start going on the original trips, like that Gambia one. It was easy because it's just me testing. It's just Hammad testing. The third guy is a really, really close friend of ours. So you can all vouch for each other. You know you're not going to take the mick with anything. You know you're going to pay for the stuff that you're supposed to pay for yourself from that point of view. But then when it gets bigger, I think you've got to be a little bit more careful. And sometimes you get people that are just going to moan anyway about, oh, this charity's rubbish, or have you done this and have you done that? And we even experienced that with some of the team members, I think, that went with Jordan, where people just go a bit overboard on it and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just about getting that balance. But like Iman says, you just got to have a good trip. Means you've got to have someone on the ground to the place that you're going to that are just going to take care of that logistics, that turn up on time, little things like just turn up on time, the bus comes on time, you get to the location on time.
We've got patience there, yeah.
Yeah, you've got patients kind of waiting for you. There's nothing worse than obviously going to that effort and turning up and feeling like there's, people aren't aware that you're there, or there's not enough people to see, and that kind of stuff. Osman, have you thought of going on a trip?
Sign me up. Last time you told me that you had enough optons, so I was like, oh, cool, okay, that's it. But who do you think really? So, okay, it doesn't sound like the most difficult thing in the world. Thankfully, we don't have the hardest job in the world. But do you think there's certain type of traits you need, or it's just just being able to go with the flow, being able to be like, oh, you know what, 6'9" is fine. That's great. Actually, this.
It is your mindset. You got to have that right mindset. You got to leave your egos at home. Team dynamics is really important by far, and this is not exaggerating. When I go with me, Waj and Ifty, we went Gambia. That's not a problem. They're my close friends. The hardest part of Jordan by far is managing a team. For anyone who's organised any events, anything, in numbers, that's always the hardest thing. Getting a team is not a problem. We're always oversubscribed. Optoms, even Gambia, I could easily take 2, 3 times, the amount we're taking. Dentists, they've had a lot more interest than what we can take. So you're always going to have that. But managing the team, even simple things like just getting the documents, doing the due diligence checks, even checking their passports. Some people don't even want to give you their passports. They want to go on a trip. They don't want to give you their passports. They think, I don't know. They think even though you're established and they've seen what you've done, I don't know what they think you're going to do with their passports. But it is a lot about managing people. Managing expectations is a big thing. Some people have got odd ideas about what a charity trip involves.
I think,
some
I think patient, like in particular, I think you've got to be, if you're going to be just part of a team, you've just got to have, I think, patience would be a good trait, and just a bit of adaptability. Just like, I'm sure when you guys work in practice, I don't really work with any other optoms. That's one thing I quite like, just being on my own. But when I'm sure you've come across other optoms that you work with, and then, some are laid back and just almost horizontal, but then you get other people that it doesn't take much to kind of panic them or get a bit stressed out, or something doesn't quite kind of go to plan. Everyone's a little bit different, isn't it? From that.
I just wanted to transition a little bit more into the Jordan aspect and testing in Jordan. With the demographic that you tested, because you mentioned there were a lot of Syrian refugees and obviously a lot of Palestinians. Did you get anyone from Gaza coming over? Because obviously the genocide going on over there. Did you get anyone from there?
Yeah, so what happened on our first day of testing, the day was actually dedicated to Gaza refugees who'd come to Jordan after October the 7th. So what had happened, I think the King of Jordan had paid for like a couple of hundred, 400 Gazan refugees who had cancer. So he said, I'll pay for their treatment so they come along with their, dependents. So not all of them had cancer. So I remember the sad case, one of the girls actually, do you remember why? One had a retinal blastoma, which is, something I've never seen in practice, something I don't ever want to see again. But there was a girl there who had a retinal blastoma. So the King of Jordan, he actually paid for them to come over and he housed them in a hotel and they were being treated, all of them who had cancer were being treated by the main cancer hospital in Amman, in the capital of Jordan. So we were one of the few charities and one of the first medical charities outside of Palestine to actually get to see, the October 7th refugees. I mean, there were some that were getting out in Egypt. Some of the richer ones who paid to get through the tunnels, I think. They got through into Egypt, into Cairo, and being treated there. But that was more of a private thing. They were the richer ones, who went with like people smugglers and so forth, from what we heard. But in terms of the proper refugees, we were one of the the first and few charities that was actually seeing them from October 7th. That is.
Did you make any like friendship with the locals, the refugees?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. I mean, obviously, generally from my experience, I've traveled Asia, Africa doing trips. You'll never meet a group of people as hospitable as Arabs generally. And we've been to very hospitable places in Africa, Philippines, even our home countries, Pakistan. But me personally, I think no one compares to them.
Are you still in contact with some of them, or not really?
Yeah, some of them still text us. I mean, with the ophthalmologists and even some of the Palestinian refugees, he gives us updates on some of the charity projects within Gaza because he's got family there. Maybe not so much as much now, but yeah, we still do, and uh, they do contact us just to see how things are, and obviously they're inviting us back, and even a lot of the refugees, they invite us back to the house because we asked them what the situation is with Syria. Do you think you're going to go back? Are you going to stay? They're in no man's land, because if they go to Syria, what do they go back to? There's nothing there for them, and the problem is if they go back to Syria, it's a one-way ticket. You're not allowed back out. You make that decision, and then you got to stay there. But they're obviously inviting us back, and I'm sure they'd love to have us back, and we'd love to go back to Jordan at some stage as well.
Yeah, 100%. You can imagine when you're there, obviously these people are often in quite dire situations and stuff. So, the opportunity to kind of know that there's people from the UK and to get that person's number and keep in contact, it's even like a bit of a way out and stuff, from that point of view, there's that little bit of hope that's there. Yeah, that Syria one was interesting because when Ahmad was planning this trip, Syria was just a complete no-go. And you got to imagine how long that Syrian conflict's been going on for. So there were people, I mean, they were like, what, 16 to 18-year-olds we were testing who were Syrians in Jordan, but all they know is Jordan. They moved to Jordan at such a young age. Our conflict's been going on over 10 years, hasn't it? So they were just basically brought over as kids. And now all of a sudden, in the space of like the 6 weeks before we went there, obviously Assad got overthrown. The countries, the borders were supposedly open up, and they were like, yeah, we'll probably go back, but either the families were saying, well, our house doesn't exist anymore. And then they were reporting over here that the country was free, there was no issue. But those guys were saying, look, there's still plenty of fighting going on, pockets of fighting between the loyalists and kind of the ones that had kind of, gone in and taken over. And then obviously from the kids' point of view, if you're there since you were like 7, and now you're 16, 17, and people are like, you're going back home to Syria, well, Jordan's kind of your home, isn't it? And like Ahmad said, the Jordanians haven't given them proper status, which is understandable because Jordan's got a very small population. Their population increased by something like 25% just in refugees from Syria. Something crazy. I think they had like 4 or 5 million people in the country and they went to like 5 or 6 or something just because of how many Syrians went. So ultimately, they kind of want them to go back anyway. They don't hate them, but they're like, Syria's a massive country as well. So they've got this weird status where they can kind of work, but they can't really do like educated jobs. They can do like labor jobs. So you've got like these people that are now studying. Like there was a girl saying like, I want to be a dentist. I'm doing really well at school. She was asking things like, is there any way I can get into an English university? How could it, do you know anything about scholars? That kind of stuff. You'd have a lot of those conversations. And by the way, a lot of their English was unbelievably good. And you'd ask them, how is your English really good? And they'd say, like, YouTube. Just learn, like,
Oh,
really. Yeah. I'm talking, like, properly good English. Yeah. Just from watching, like, American stuff and this, that, and the other. So,
Even with the situation with Syria was, the first of its kind amongst charities generally, because these were a lot of them were like lower middle class, middle class. They were used to a certain lifestyle. Then all of a sudden they're refugees. I was speaking to a CEO, ex-CEO of one of the big Muslim charities recently, and he was telling me, they found it hard. They were giving food parcels to Syrian families, refugees, and they're going, what we got to do with this? There's like basic staples. Even we had that in Jordan. We was giving them glasses, and they were saying, "Well, can't you give us something a bit better?" Because
yeah.
they were used to actually going to opticians back home. Remember, Syria was quite a well-developed country. That's a big difference between the Middle East and African countries. Some of the African countries you go to, some of the patients we see in the African countries, and this is not an exaggeration or a cliche. If we don't see them, they're never going to be seen in their life by an optom or a dentist, maybe even a doctor. But whereas a lot of the refugees, they've had that sort of treatment before. They've faced a lot of hardships and they've been through, a lot of difficulties. I mean, I don't need to go into the details. It's obvious what what they're suffering, the genocide and so forth. But at some stage in their life, they've had medical intervention, they've had medical treatment, they've had glasses, they've had eye tests, they've had dental treatment. But Africa's a completely different kettle of fish. These are communities that we're going to who may never see an optom ever. They may never get glasses. Uh, and a simple pair of glasses can make a massive difference. For example, you imagine anyone over presbyopia, by the way, normally kicks in a little bit earlier in those countries. Common to, give you like your +1 ads, your 150 ads in people's mid-30s. Very, very common. So imagine you got like the tailor, the seamstress. They can't see anything. You give them a pair of +150s, +2s. It's made a massive difference to their life. So there is a big difference between the countries that we go to. Hence why we don't just concentrate on one area. We're not going to restrict ourselves just to the Middle East. We do plan on returning. Uh, Syria is one that we're definitely looking to go to, inshallah. Sanctions are being lifted by the international community, so hopefully that will open up for us next year. Massive need there. All the refugees returning. Be interesting to see how that how that progresses, what the situation is there. But inshallah, that's one that we're definitely looking to do in the near future.
Do either of you remember any particular cases of a patient that really, you left on, you kind of weighed on you, whether it's because you made a massive difference to them or whether it's because of, their stories, or any patients that you still, you still think
You know,
about here and there?
to be honest, probably more from the earlier trips, not so much from Jordan. I mean, Jordan, for example, there was some of the cancer patients, like the little girl with retinal blastoma. And that's very rare. She was like a baby. I think she had some other cancer as well, actually. I think it was a secondary cancer, the retinal blastoma.
Yeah, there was
So
a
she had,
couple of other patients as well that unfortunately we found out we saw those patients and then not too long after they passed away, due to cancer. We found that. Remember that guy was
yeah,
messaging.
the young kid, yeah. So we had that. I mean, one of my memories that sticks out was on my first trip to Burkina Faso. I think Burkina Faso, I don't know about the situation now, but it was in top 10 poorest countries when we went.
Very poor. Very, very
Right.
poor.
And very, very poor. And I remember a kid coming in, teenager, and he was, the poor people would say he was poor. And he just looked like he was about to die. And I had one of my friends, Waj's cousin actually, she was with me on that trip, and we just looked at him, and we just looked at each other and thought, this kid looks like he's about to die. He stumbled in, I think he had one slipper on, really disheveled appearance. He was like the poor of the poor amongst their community. And that really took us aback because some of the other countries you go for example, Ethiopia is nothing like what Band Aid showed it to be. Ethiopia is a beautiful country. Yes, there's pockets of poverty, but unless there's a famine, you don't see pot-bellied children with flies flying around them. This is, just a Western portrayal. It's nothing like that. But Burkina Faso, we were seeing real poverty. You know, people that were honestly hand to mouth, really thin, really disheveled appearance. They actually look, some of the kids, they looked like they was about to die. Not all of them, but there was some. And that really, and even this is maybe 20 years on now, maybe 15 years on, and I can still remember that kid coming in for his eye test, looking as if he's about to die.
Yeah, I
What
think
you
you get
watch?
odd cases like that, and I think it's more. Might be a good point about, like the Syrian, some of the Syrians that we saw, which is automatic. I do the same as well. If you think of refugees, you automatically think kind of poor person, but a refugee is someone who's normally just fleeing a situation. So we saw some Syrians in Jordan that were very well presented, and they'd been there a long time, and then they were really well dressed and often spoke quite good English. And then you realize that they were just very, very well off in Syria, but they just couldn't stay there. So then they moved to like the city areas just north of Amman. And obviously, because they've got money, they could get some half decent accommodation, still technically refugees. And they'd been there for a really, really long time. And then the very next day, you'd go to this place where people are just in tents. And my assumption was, well, these lot must have just got here now because those lot have been here for 10 years. So these lot, they're in tents. They must have just got here. Then you speak to them and they're like, now we've been in these tents for like 5 years. They just keep moving us. And you realize, no, they came at the same time. These lot just had no money. So they've got no means of going into Syria and saying, we've got a little bit of money. We can pay for a bit of rent. We can do this. We can do that. They literally just had nothing. And then apart from that, yeah, I think when you're in places like Burkina Faso, even Gambia to an extent, there was a guy, and obviously in terms of patients, you generally remember your A-fakes, the guy that's coming in with a pair of like battered like plus tens, and they're just not even glasses, they're taped up because he's had them for like 10 years. Um, Other patients, there was a guy, we had that many patients to see. There was a guy who came, and I think he traveled by bus or something, and then he stayed, and he couldn't be seen because we just ran out of time. And they were saying that basically he didn't have enough money to go. He had enough money just to get back to where he came from. So he just stayed overnight and then he just waited until the next morning when we came back and then we tested him so he could get some glasses and then he could go. It's that kind of stuff, isn't it? And then what was that bus fare from? I don't know, probably like 20, 30p. But he was like, he could only make that kind of trip. So they're the patients that you kind of remember, which is less eye related. Like Ahmad mentioned about that boy in like Burkina was very, very poor, by the way. You see people with like barely wearing any clothes and that kind of stuff. I think you probably remember more people's situation rather than there was this particular eye condition or that kind
Yeah,
of.
you don't remember pathology as much because I mean you go to certain countries and you see like your onco, your river blindness, your trichiasis, but you commonly start to see it. I mean, when do you ever see that in the UK? Trichiasis, river blind, you never see it. You know, I was explaining to someone on one of the WhatsApp groups earlier that in countries like Ghana and Gambia, everyone's distals glaucoma suspect. Like the average CD ratio is like, what is it, like 0.7, 0.8, isn't it, Waj? You'd be referring everyone if they were here. Uh, you do remember certain pathology, but like White said, it's their situation. People travel from far in a lot of the countries. Where we was in Gambia, I know Waj is going to laugh at this, but where we was in Gambia, we had a lot of patients crossing over from Senegal because they intermingle a lot. And Waj doesn't believe this, but they did actually close where we was testing the Senegal border. For some of the
Right.
time was there because there was too many people that were coming across. Waj they closed it. They closed the Senegal border because we was there and there's too many people and they couldn't handle it. And that just shows you how desperate people were, just to
Yeah.
come and see us.
Right. Maybe needs to edit that bit out because I'm pretty sure they didn't close the border just because we were there.
Right. Do you know the funny thing is? Do you know when I spoke to the health ministry this time
Shut up, man.
in Gambia, they were actually saying that they will be looking to get there and they'll have to control the border.
Guys are doing
Right,
tidal waves
haters
in
will
the
be
country.
haters.
But yeah,
But
it is more the
you
situation.
guys are going to be seeing like 500 patients a day, aren't you? Is
Yeah,
that
the way
You
the
guys are
side
going to be going as celebrity. They'll have posters of you guys up.
kind of going and that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's more people's situations. And obviously, if you're generally quite chatty, even though you've got loads of people to see, when that person comes in with the translator and stuff, you still want that same kind of, it's nice to ask, isn't it, about where they're from, have they come with family, what's their situation, from that point of view. And then, people like that side. And that's when you find out about these stories and that kind of stuff. And then you get It's like a lot of these places, isn't it? You get those people that we saw were literally living in tents in Jordan and in places like Burkina and some of the slightly more rural areas. It's really a dire situation, but the kids are still running around with smiles on their faces. They're just not the kind of, it's just their reality, isn't it? And you look at it and you're like devastated for them. And then you think, well, that's just their norm, isn't it? So they're not down in the dumps about anything. They're just kind of, we just get on with it. This just is what it
You
is,
know what?
isn't it?
They're content with life. They just get on with
Yeah,
it. They don't
100%.
complain.
Yeah.
You know, it's just
So it's a good reminder. Obviously, it's like, I don't know, it sounds a bit cheesy, but certainly for ourselves, certainly when, and it wears off, which is bad. When you do come back, you think about it a lot, and it generally does alter your perspective. On the kind of stuff that we, they say first world problems. It is a bit cliched and stuff, but yeah, you kind of. I feel like, for me personally, anyway, to do something like that once a year, once every couple of years, it's not a huge amount of time, and it's just a good little, reminder and that kind of stuff. And we're still going there, and we're flying in comfort, and we're staying in, half decent accommodation and that kind of stuff. But I think to have those reminders and to kind of see it yourself, I think it's a good thing to do. There's lots of things we can do to try and help people in difficult situations. From ourselves, we can make dua, we can obviously donate, but I don't think there's much substitute for just going there yourself and just
yeah.
having.
I mean, like we said, anyone can donate, and it is good that you're always going to need people that donate, but to actually, put the sacrifice in and sacrifice your time, you know. I mean, Jordan, in terms of accommodation, was quite good, but it's not always like that in some of the other countries. Very basic accommodation, food can be very basic. You just got to sacrifice that for that, the week you're there. It's a very humbling experience. As I said, it's very rewarding. I'd encourage. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but something that if you've got any sort of inclination to it, I would encourage people to do. It does get you out. I mean, maybe it's not as busy up in Scotland and Yorkshire, but it gets you out the rat race in places like London. It's like a calmer pace of life and so forth. But something, yeah, I keep saying it, but I would definitely recommend, for all
So
optoms.
what's next trip's in December, inshallah?
December,
What's
that's
the
right,
plan
yeah.
with that?
So next big trip is to Gambia, multidisciplinary, 16th to the 23rd. We're just we're in quite advanced talks actually with the health ministry in Gambia. We've got all the authorizations we need because that's another another side point that when you do these trips, especially with the size that we go, you can't just rock up in a country and start testing. You need multiple authorizations, multiple permissions. When we go often, not always for the optoms because they're not always a regulated profession there, but for the doctors, dentists, you definitely have to get them registered. They have to provide all their proofs, accreditation, so forth. We did in Jordan actually for the optoms, to the extent that you even have to get your degree certificate. They ask for that, your CV and so forth. So Gambia is the next big one, potentially as a small mini trip before then to another country, planning for next year. But the one that's confirmed for sure is Gambia, 16th to the 23rd, and probably looking at taking a team of maybe 40 to 50. Optom team, eyecare team, we've already got 15. We'll maybe add up to 5 more members for that. People like ophthalmologists. We're still looking for IP optoms. Even just whilst I was on this a minute ago, one of my team members has just messaged me saying I might be able to get a donation of a Hog Strike slit lamp. Is that any use? Which is excellent. People do reach out, people do donate. So I'll get back to her, straight after I get off this because we was actually looking to ship a few slit lamps out, pay for them slipping out. Dentists is a team of about 10 to 12. Doctors we're probably looking at about 10, and then you have like maybe 5 helpers. So you're probably looking at a team of 45 to 50 going out to Gambia. I think in terms of the big projects, the multidisciplinary ones, I think we're looking at maybe just once, maximum twice a year. But we're looking for that to branch out. We want smaller Optom teams to go out on their own. I don't want it to be the case that just Hamad goes and then we go. I want other Optoms, to learn how to do it. To take their own teams out, take 4 or 6 optoms out. Gambia is one where we're going to look to establish that. It's a very easy one for us to organise. So maybe in 4 months, 6 months, we'll send, another optom deployment out. We're looking to do that with a dentist as well. Doctors a little bit harder, but definitely with the optoms and dentists, we're looking at taking, splintering off and sending smaller teams out to different countries. Definitely, inshallah.
I think as optoms, it's like dental. It always amazes me, the amount of equipment that they've got, and obviously they need certain conditions. It's the same even like with dom work. I think in this country, you find dentists shy. My brother's a dentist. They shy away from it a little bit because it's not particularly lucrative for them, and it's just a lot of faffing around with all the different tools we have. So as optoms, we're quite fortunate in that you don't need that much stuff to kind of go and test in these kind of places and stuff. So you can, like Ahmad said, a smaller. Well, we've done it, isn't it? We've shown that with a very small team, you can still do, a pretty decent amount of work in the space of like 4 or 5 days kind of testing. And that's all you really need. If you're doing that flat out, you'll be battered by the end of it anyway.
And
The idea.
the funny thing is, me and Waj in Gambia, just two of us, 5 days testing, same as what we done in Jordan. Between us two, we saw more patients than 10 to 12 optoms saw in Jordan.
Yeah, pretty much.
Why is
Yeah.
that?
There's a multiple of reasons. In Gambia, there's just so many patients. They're everywhere. In Jordan, the patients had to be registered with the government. The government had to dictate to us who we could see. So they were like numbered patients. We couldn't just gather patients off the street like we can in Gambia.
Well, there was I think because we went there as a multidisciplinary team, I think there were some people when they knew they were there, if you've got kind of some major health conditions or you've not been able to see a doctor, I think you would prioritize that a little bit, isn't it? Whereas I think
I mean, that did happen to us on a couple of days where, obviously they're going to prioritize the doctors. The doctors saw a lot of patients, and then time ran out for them to see the optoms and the dentists. So there was those sort of reasons. It was a bit harder in Jordan because we had all those patients to see 3 different professions, whereas in Gambia, it's obviously just seeing me and you, right? So it's a lot easier.
yeah, although realistically as well, some of the travel time was a little bit more. I don't think there was quite the same urgency. I just felt like certainly in Gambia, there was just once on that first day we saw how many patients were there. We kind of realized that right, we're just going to be pretty much flat out because there's only 2 of us testing, one of us kind of doing the dispensing, and if this is the kind of numbers that are turning up, I can send you a link to like that document. That documentary is like a bit of a
Yeah,
half tongue.
give us the link and we can put it into the caption.
Yeah, for people to see. But I've certainly got like a couple of really good videos of just the amount of people that were kind of turning up.
Yeah, well, if you send the video of, the short clip of when we turn up to our clinic in
Yeah, I've got some of those. And I can send those.
in Gambia,
It gives
I
a real
think,
good feel for kind of what it was like over there and stuff.
and I think even our documentary, I don't think anyone else has actually done a proper documentary on an eyecare team from the UK going out. So that does give you a good insight.
Yeah, we'll add the documentary to the caption of both the podcast and maybe a couple of the reels. So
yeah, if you could do that, Waj, please.
Yeah,
no.
that'd be great.
I said to him before you came on, I said, how long do these things last? And they go, it depends how chatty the guest is. I said, well, my man won't shut up, yeah, so you're going to be fine for about 2 hours.
Do you know the longest part of any of our trips is when Waj does, we normally have like a end of trip dinner.
Yeah.
And I don't normally like talking, so I normally get Waj to do it. But the problem is he doesn't shut up. So even, he goes on for like 20, 30 minutes saying something that could have been said in 2 minutes. Just to be polite, I have to let him get on with it.
Right, a couple of points more optom based. We glossed over pathologies a little bit. What were the most common pathologies that you tend to manage?
So obviously you've got cataracts, you've got the glaucomas amongst the adults. Occasionally you may see vitamin A deficiency, corneal, very dry eyes, corneal scarring. Not so much in Jordan. We didn't really see much. You may see, because they're living in like the desert intensive. You get the inflamed pinguecules, those sort of things, trigiums and so forth. Obviously in the African countries, you see river blindness. You see trichitis. You see a lot of entropion. You see some mad scarring at the back of the eyes as well sometimes, and you think, I don't know what parasite that is. It's imagine like toxoplasmosis times 10, and you think, what is that? Anything else you can think of, Waj?
Yeah, lid conditions, you see. Cataracts obviously tends to be the main one. I mean, they're literally the 2 biggest issues, certainly in rural Africa, is just not having reading glasses, just literally losing the ability to do anything.
Also, the RXs vary a lot. So I remember Ethiopia, where we were testing the people in the mountains, we were seeing loads of really high myopes. We're talking -20, -10, -50, -20. There's quite a few of those, and I've never seen that on any other trip. So it must be something to do with, the climate, or I don't know, but you sometimes see that as well.
Yeah,
I
you
think
definitely.
one thing we saw a bit more in Jordan, Waj, which is obviously more prevalent amongst Arabs in general, is keratoconus. Now
Oh yeah, we did
I've
actually.
never seen keratoconus in an African country, but that's one thing we saw. But that's generally more prevalent in the Middle East anyway, to be keratoconic.
And then one thing I wanted to just question was dilations. How frequently did you dilate? Did you dilate everyone, or did you not dilate at all?
No, we had drops with us.
We
Not that often. I didn't dilate anyone, I don't think, in
No,
Jordan.
I mean sometimes. I mean, I'll probably do it on a trip. I might do a handful of cyclos and some of the kids. I think actually in the Gambia documentary we're going to forward you, it's actually got part of that is me cycloing a kid, flooding his eyes with 1% cyclopentylate, not just one drop. But I know a lot of the ones who specialize in peds, a lot of like the hospital optoms, Ardil, our orthoptist and optom, he was doing a lot of cyclos. It's just what they're used to doing because they're used to doing it in hospital. So a lot of the girls, a lot of the female optoms work in hospital. Ardil, who's an orthoptist, they were cycloing a lot.
There's
Great.
that thing of, like, it sounds harsh as well. I think when you get there and you learn what the pathways are, and you realize you're in some places where there's just going to be no referral, it's going to be really difficult, or maybe it's something that we might have to try and kind of pay for from that point of view. What exactly you're kind of looking for, harsh as it sounds, isn't it? You've got, let's say in the UK, you've got someone with really good vision, VA in one eye. The other one seems to be, for some unknown, obvious reason, and you've got a translator asking if they've got a bit of a lazy eye. It's a little bit dropped. I think you'd really want to know why that eye is poor here and maybe get it investigated. Whereas sometimes when you're in a situation where it's a complete flip, you're just happy that you've got one eye that's really good and that doesn't seem to have any issues. The pressure's good. They're seeing really well. You're not really going to then kill your next kind of hour or so, maybe by dilating someone. It's that kind of stuff that you kind of decide quite quickly. It's more, like I said, on the kid side, if you feel like, don't forget, in Gambia, this last trip in Jordan was the only time I've ever seen. They just happened to have like an autorefractor there that they allowed us to kind of use, whereas before, you do that quick first ret on a kid and you just see some mad reflex. You might then obviously want to cycle them, from that point of view, because you're going to have a real difficulty with ret. Having said that, the kids are generally quite compliant. I think because they just get beats, don't they? Over there, if they're not, you can't do that here, can you? The parents, let's be honest, in Africa, they'll get a slap in it if they don't. In Africa, you see him, the parents will start battering him in front of you. Topping it.
You know what? You mentioned earlier about one patient that stands out. I remember I had one girl once, and I was just completely mashed. Retinal scarring everywhere, and I was questioning, getting a translator to question, what had happened, eye infection, ill when she was younger, polio, something like that. And we finally managed to get out of her that she was being naughty when she was younger, and the mum threw some sort of metal instrument at her, and it hit her on the eye, and that's the reason that eye was blind.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
Yeah, one of the other things that is difficult on these trips, what I will say, joking aside, is that kind of example where you will see patients with horrendous corneal scarring on both eyes, and then you think, you know what, it might be like 4 or 5 o'clock, and you realize, you know what, this patient might have been sat here for like 6 or 7 hours, and all they know is that people have come from England, and they're obviously, we're optoms, isn't it? But they view us as eye doctors. And then, you have that, it's a bit of a sinking feeling when somebody, before they've even sat in the chair, you just know that this is not a cataract. It's not, it's quite, it's difficult. I think they're the kind of, I can't think of a particular case because it happens, a good few times on the trip where you just know
You just can't do anything.
can't do
Yeah.
anything. You can't even say much to them. And you'll let them sit in the chair and you'll just almost have a chat with them, but you feel like they've probably been waiting all day with some kind of hope of, oh, these guys are coming, maybe they can do something. This person's effectively blind, and you just know, even if they're in the UK, nothing could be done. There's that much scarring, it's that long standing, it's not a kind of even a graft, it's just not happening. And that's difficult because you kind of know that they've come with a little bit of hope. So yeah, I think
maybe one of the differences that you have, especially with like older patients, is that in the UK you get a lot of older patients turning up because they kind of just want to have a chat as well. Whereas I'm guessing in like, especially the Gambia, they literally turning up because they need their eyes tested.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's like we said earlier, it's the only opportunity they may ever get in their life.
Yeah.
Just going off on a tangent, one other thing that we commonly see in the African countries is the result of where someone's had an eye condition treated by like a witch doctor or the local herbalist or traditionalist doctor. So sometimes they mash their eyes up. You know, some of that corneal scarring is due to some treatment or some lotion or potion that some witch doctor's given them to cure something, and they've just made it 10 times worse. That is still, you know, more in the rural areas, but that is something that we sometimes come across.
Thank you very much, Hammad, and thank you very much, Wajid, for the detailed actually explanation of how the charity works and how working or volunteering as an optometrist abroad in the charity kind of played out. I think this is a very good one advertisement for other optoms and maybe other clinical professionals that might want to join in and help out as well, or maybe even set up their own kind of charity to go help out across the world or abroad, but also maybe even just as a point of information to see what it's like testing in other countries as well. So thank you very much for that. I think we'll do another episode in the next one. We'll probably just cover dummy testing in the UK. So we're going back to the UK now. But yeah, for today, thank you very much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.